looks like this is going to be one of those weeks that is predominantly negative, which actually sucks. Despite popular belief, I actually really hate when that happens. So, like, there's usually at least one kind of somewhat silver lining, but, yeah, but these are the options. So, so, yeah, we'll see what happens. Let's start with Mile 22, the movie that I've been excited about ever since I heard about it, because it was the next one in line with the collaboration of Mark Wahlberg and Peter Berg that has just been so incredibly great since 2013, starting with Lone Survivor, and then in 2016 they had the one-two punch with Deepwater Horizon, followed by the best movie, in my opinion, of that year, Patriots Day. And now they follow that up with this. And actually, believe it or not, despite what's happened here, I almost feel like it is such a random detour into shittiness, more or less, that it actually hasn't really affected my excitement for what is, to my understanding, their next collaboration, which I think is a movie called Wonderland, that they're, like, already working on. So yeah, so I'm just gonna take this as this is just a one-time thing. I still have faith in them because the other stuff was just too good. This has to have just been a miscalculation or something, so, and I think one of those miscalculations starts with, the screenplay is by a woman named Leah Carpenter, who I had to look up, and it turns out the reason I had to look her up is because this appears to be the first thing that she's written. The only other thing to her credit is the untitled sequel to this. So, if this was, like, you know, somebody's first script, I totally buy that. So, but even so, like, really terrible as the script is, there's a lot of problems that go beyond that, unfortunately. Like, I would love to just put it on one thing and say, oh, it must be that, and let it go, but, there's more. Like, kind of starting right away with this opening that could have been effective, but it just feels it's so disorganized and so confusing. And not confusing necessarily in the way of, like, usually if you don't understand the opening to a movie, when you've just been thrust into something immediately and they want to, you know, hook you immediately, it's a scene that you can, like, go back and watch, and if you go back and watch it through again, knowing what exactly the layout is and what's happening, it makes a lot more sense. It doesn't feel near as, like, you know, packed and confusing and jumbled and all that. But I feel like if I were to see the opening scene of Mile 22 again, knowing what the outcome is, I would still be really confused because it's just so sort of all over the place, and the intro, I can imagine another universe where that intro feels, like, smoother and is ultimately enticing, but where we kind of start with this ruse that Lauren Cohen and the other dude are walking to this house, and it seems like they're just a couple going to another couple's house. Then we pan around to Wahlberg and Ronda Rousey in the bushes with their rifles, and then what's going on inside the house, but yeah, it gets all really, the editing is all over the place, and most things are unclear about it, especially when the action really starts to break out, but even before that, it's, yeah. So we eventually get this opening, an opening credit sequence, actually, that gives us a backstory that's basically like, it's basically like watching the Ben Affleck movie The Accountant in Fast Forward, is what this opening is. And well, the thing about that, though, is that he has some sort of problem, Wahlberg's character, but, like, some sort of, I don't know if it's a disorder or what, but they, like, there's a joke in the middle of the movie where they finally touch on this, and one person says it's one thing, one person says it's another, one person says it's another, then somebody just says he's just an asshole. But I don't remember if they ever actually specified what it is, but it doesn't really matter because every damn character in this movie has, like, a tick of sorts, or a character trait that's annoyingly in your face about it. Because on top of just what he's doing in general, His thing is that he has this band around this like rubber band around his wrist that he's constantly snapping, and I mean constantly, and like that's a sound you have to hear through like the whole movie in all scenarios, and it's like I get giving your character a tick, but if you don't think that's going to annoy the shit out of the audience eventually, there's going to be a problem. But that's not all. There's also, obviously, the guy he has to escort is the guy from The Raid that played Rama, and he's like, he does like this, we learn later it's like a meditation thing apparently with his fingers, and he's just doing that in most of his scenes. But then, no, that's not all. We also have Malkovich, who's the guy that's like overseeing everything. He's like the head of whatever the fuck they are. And he has a couple of, I guess, superstitions when they're on missions. Number one, he has to be wearing the right shoes, which are just like sneakers. And for some reason, he has to be surrounded by these bobbleheads of presidents that he keeps in their own case. This really big, important looking case. And it's just, and it's like they just kept getting more and more ridiculous as it went. It's like, okay, this character has one particular trait, but then, like, almost every character seemed to have one. There's also, Lauren Cohen's character is going through a divorce with Peter Berg's cameo. But this scene, and actually many of the other scenes, really show a huge problem in this movie, and that is the editing, which really sucks, because there's just something so smooth, like effortlessly smooth about the frenetic movies like Lone Survivor, Deepwater Horizon, and Patriots Day. But just the way they flow is so perfect. The action scenes or anything else. And I don't know what the fuck happened here. And it's almost like its own joke, because Peter Berg was putting these videos up on his Instagram of him arguing with his editor, and it's the guy that's done all the other movies too. So you know there's like there's a banter there that's established because they've worked together for so long. But the thing is you can't quite tell if it's jokey banter, if it's serious arguing, or if it's just them fucking around and putting videos online. But I don't. There's gotta be some truth in it, because you can just tell something is off about this. Like neither one of them could agree on something in regards to the editing, because this thing is so all over the damn place with what it's doing. It's one of those movies that has about 50 different cuts just during a conversation with no action at all, and the way it kind of goes, it seems to find one angle and then it seems to find another, and usually it's like, well, we like to have coverage from different angles or whatever, and then we can like occasionally maybe cut to this one, or just, entirely use this one or whatever. But they wanted to use, it seems like they wanted to use like every piece of footage of every angle that they had. So it's just like it's all in there. I feel like there was even one scene at least where we got one angle of somebody saying something, and then another angle of that same moment. But it's kind of hard to tell, because there's so many moments in this movie, for some reason, where people just, like, the dialogue is so repetitive. Like, everybody in this movie is the Get the Papers guy from Goodfellas. It's like almost every line of dialogue is said multiple times before they've done said it. Even lines as ridiculous as Wahlberg tossing Ronda Rousey's birthday cake across the little place that they're in, and he screams, "No birthday cake for you," twice in her face, one time louder than the other. And this isn't the only scene that happens in. And it's like, okay, when that's like the first time it happened, so it's like, okay, maybe it's one of Wahlberg's tics or something. But no, other characters do it. The random dude, the not Will Patton guy that I had to take a long time to convince myself wasn't Will Patton, even he did it at some point. And it's, yeah. And also, there's actually also cases where, like, you get to Lauren Cohen's dialogue where it's like, it feels repetitive, but it's just so shittily written that it's actually not her saying the same thing over and over and over again, but it just feels like it. I don't know if I just got used to hearing the same lines of dialogue over and over again, repeatedly, or what, but yes, anyway, that became a problem. But another thing that stood out, I was talking about the Peter Berg thing, made me really realize this, and that's like, it's almost like he was it was almost like he was ashamed that he gave himself a cameo, because it's like every time, because he's on, the only time we see him is like on the phone or whatever, And it's like every time it cut to him, he was only there for like a second because it would cut right back to her. And this seems kind of like we already had a big action scene, that big confusing opening scene and everything, but it was actually this little mundane scene that made me start saying, huh, he sure is cutting awfully fast. just her talking to her ex-husband on the phone, arguing about their daughter. And yeah, and this is like basically throughout. The movie is only like an hour 35, which it feels about right. I had heard some complaints that it felt really long. It feels about an hour 35. But it's just so, that just becomes so grating because the thing about it is, if you look up, you probably learn that the whole plot is basically the movie 16 Blocks, the movie with Bruce Willis and Mos Def. It's basically supposed to be that, but the thing is that storyline of him having to transfer the guy actually starts at like the 50-minute mark of this hour and 35-minute movie. So there is like 50 minutes of just this aggravating, very choppily edited stuff of people just kind of going back and forth with really shitty dialogue, basically trying to get us to this point. And there was one particular scene that made it all feel so incredibly pointless. And I actually had a bit of a guide to go on this, due to what I'm assuming is a mistake. So at about the 45-minute mark, an old couple comes in the theater and gets comfortable. And it was just like, maybe they're those type of people where they just don't care what they see, and they just kind of show up to the mall and they say, whatever's playing, we'll buy a ticket. And they've got to be like in their 70s or 80s or something. And then shortly after they show up, a fight scene breaks out where like two people get stabbed in the face. And it's really brutal. And then about 10 minutes later they walked out and they never came back. But while they were in the theater, I was actually thinking, they probably think they walked in at a good time. Because we've had 45 to 50 minutes of movie already, and then there is one scene right before they start the whole transferring thing where Malkovich lays out everything that has happened up to this point, from the beginning to at that very moment, in like 3 sentences. And it's like, if they hadn't walked out, they would have been just fine, because it's like, they knew exactly what was going on, walking in like 50 minutes late to an hour and 35-minute movie. That is how much of this movie is so useless, honestly. Because there's maybe a couple of fight scenes in there, and yeah, obviously they are very shoddily edited and all that, and there's like, it's a bit too shaky and a bit too up close sometimes, but it's like, even so, it's the dude from The Raid. It's gonna be a pleasure to watch him fight in any circumstance, quite honestly. Like, it's like, and he does get some memorable moments, like when there's a broken car window and he takes the dude's neck and like repeatedly drags it across. Like, brutal stuff like that will stick in your mind. And with a movie this pointless and probably ultimately unmemorable, it could use all the memorable scenes it can get, no matter how brutal they have to go to get there. So, you know, good job to that scene for at least being memorable. So it'll always have that, if nothing else. And then one thing that I kind of knew going in, like I was a little worried about, was like, you know, being such a huge fan of Lone Survivor, Deepwater Horizon, and especially Patriots Day, I did feel something inside me just a little bit that I tried to ignore, and that was when Lauren Cohan and Ronda Rousey were on the cast list. They were high on the cast list, which I found out a while back. And yeah, some red flags went up, because it's like, I mean, I don't know Lauren Cohan from a lot, but from what I've seen, I'm not exactly a fan. And then Ronda Rousey, obviously, like, I don't hate her or anything, but acting is, like, so not her strong suit. So, so there was that. But they really, I guess, proved that. And obviously Cohen's not being helped at all by the script. There is a particular scene that is just absolutely humiliating, where she is confronting a dude, and she says, she's like, he's just kind of scoffing it off and all that. I think it's the Ray dude, actually. And she's kind of interrogating him, and he's just, saying whatever. And she gets, like, as serious as she can. And she says, do you think just because I'm a woman, I am not capable of extreme violence? See, it's already a shitty line. Nobody, no matter how badass, could have delivered that line. But it just... The fact is, though, is that if you at least had an actress that could be convincingly threatening, they might have at least been able to somewhat skip by it. But this is only making a bad case a worse case, and it is just... Yes, I don't know how else to describe how shitty that whole scene is. And they do... At first I thought they weren't even gonna deliver on that, but it's like they do have one scene towards the end that's pretty much devoted to just being a payoff to her saying that. But even then... I mean, it catches you by surprise a little bit in its brutality, but at the same time it's like, yeah, but it spawns from that just... Even after seeing her commit what she calls extreme violence, I still can't bring myself to buy that line or that delivery of it from her. It's just, it's forced in all the wrong ways. So, yes, there is that. Now, there's also the problem that I think, honestly, when I talk about that, I do think there's a big miscasting issue here, and I don't just mean with Laura Goyen, I mean, like, probably everybody, and I don't just mean the actors. Like, I see this script, and there's probably a Peter Berg movie in here. I was getting some vibes, actually, vaguely, of some of the action scenes in... Does anybody remember The Kingdom? With, like, Jamie Foxx and Jennifer Garner? It was like, I could see, like, that Peter Berg doing the action scenes in this movie. But overall, it just felt like there just needed to be something. Maybe it's the lack of the true story angle. I don't know, but it just feels like this was just not the project either one of them should have gone for, because Wahlberg feels miscast, she feels miscast. It's, like I said, the material obviously didn't speak to Berg in the way that the other movies did, because we would have had something better than this. He could have definitely pulled off something better than this. But it just, there just had to have been, it's baffling, there had to have been, like, some sort of disconnect between him and the material at some point. Like, obviously, he read the script, he said, I'm gonna make this, we're gonna cast Mark Wahlberg, all that stuff. But there just had to have been somewhere in the middle where something went wrong. Because these two working together does not go like this. This is... Like I'm saying, like, I'm still excited for their next outing, because this has to be some random fuck-up. Just totally, completely random. We can only hope, anyway. So, that's really all I can say. Like, every now and then there's an inspired moment, like, when there's a very we get time to anticipate a certain explosion. And then when the music builds up and, like, the time runs out and all that stuff, he gives us this really distant shot of, like, the whole city. And then we see, like, the explosion down here. And then we go down into the aftermath of it. So I thought stuff like that was kind of cool. And every now and then there's, like, a funny moment. Like, the dude piloting the drone. When he's like begging to take the shot in a crucial moment. And then, like, even in this crucial moment, there's just this funny delivery of he's denied taking the shot, and in this dramatic moment he's like, please? Like, can I please take the shot? So every now and then there's something like that, but overall, this was like a major disappointment, and like I said, it's just such an off thing when you look at what they've done. I'm almost not even alarmed about the fact that they're going to work together again, because it's like, I think once they see the turnout of this, they'll realize, if they don't already, that something was off here on this production for some reason. But I really, really hope they can bounce back. I'm definitely still rooting for them, so we'll see what happens with that. Next, we're going to go on to Teen Titans Go to the Movies, which I'm just going to go ahead and say right up front, not familiar with this material, and I kept hearing that that didn't matter. That there were people that did not go into, not just this, but even the regular Teen Titans stuff. People would just go into this blind, and they still came out of it, like, you know, saying it's really funny, it's really upbeat, there's a lot of great jokes, a lot of in-jokes, all that stuff. So I wasn't too worried about that, but I did also hear that I guess there's like a whole thing where there was the Teen Titans thing, which was a bit more serious, I think, and then this kind of, you know, more child-like spin-off. And I guess the fans of Teen Titans, like notoriously hate the whole Teen Titans Go thing. So there was that whole thing kind of looming over it, but yeah, so I don't know exactly how this and what the regular show are like if one is that much different from the other or not. But this movie and the Teen Titans Go show, I'm not sure, but I'm actually so unfamiliar with this that the short that plays the late Gatsby, or late Batsby, sorry, where it's Batgirl being late to the party to fight Mr. Freeze. I'm not sure what I thought it was when it said the late Batsby on her clock, if that's just something that it said, but I was not aware until the little credits came up that this was a short. I was under the impression that I was watching the thing, and I was trying to figure out how this opening was going to tie into everything else, because I know at least who the characters are. But yeah, so that immediately was like, oh, I guess I'm like really out of touch with this material if I wasn't aware of that. So, but once the thing started, we were fine. So, obviously, immediate comparisons to the Lego Batman movie. Unfortunately, that's what I was doing a lot of the time, because it's sort of like, my main complaint with this movie is that there is so much this movie does that, in basically it feels like its whole concept really doesn't feel a lot different from what the Lego Batman movie was doing, in regards to like where the jokes are coming from and the humor and all that. So they even do the thing where like where we had, you know, Will Arnett, you know, trash talking the logos and all that. We actually have the characters, like they reenact the DC logo from the live action movies first and foremost, and then we go right into everything else. And it's one of those cases where I totally get that people are still into the whole meta humor thing. That's why people go absolutely crazy for Deadpool. That's why we all went crazy for the Lego Batman movie and all that. But it was while watching this, and obviously I really wasn't big on Deadpool 2. I just think the whole meta thing is like, particularly in the superhero universe, more so. Like stuff like 22 Jump Street is still great and all that, but in regards to being meta in the superhero universe, with the Deadpool movies on top of Lego Batman, it started to make me I started to realize while watching this movie that it was like, I think just about all the jokes have been touched on at this point. And so a lot of them tend to resurface. It's like when I talked about Deadpool 2, I was like, one of my complaints was, are we seriously still on the Green Lantern jokes, for God's sake? I mean, like, how long are you going to drag it out? That movie is, what, 7 years old now? And, like, Ryan Reynolds can't go any fucking where without bringing it up. He's worse than Clooney is about that with Batman and Robin. And it's like, yes, we fucking get it. You made a superhero movie that everybody hated. Do you have any fucking thing else to say? And sure enough, the movie's been on for like 5 or 10 minutes. And what do we get? Everybody talking about all the movies, the live-action movies they got, and Green Lantern saying, I got a movie, but we don't talk about that. He's doing fucking internet speak. He's doing the people that got pissed off at M. Night Shyamalan's Last Airbender movie that say, oh, we don't talk about that. We're bringing that into mainstream movies now, so that's sort of, yeah, but I even with that being very frustrating very quickly, I was going to try to keep going because it's like, it's one joke. We got a whole other movie of jokes going on here, so let's just continue. And just throughout, all the jokes just feel very familiar, whether it be movie references, or references to themselves, or references to Marvel. And yeah, there are digs at Marvel and stuff like that, and jokes directed at Marvel, but I do like that it would probably be the easy route. Actually, I don't know which route is easier between making fun of themselves, because they got so much ammo, and making fun of Marvel, that they seem to go more towards themselves than they do Marvel, at least. Obviously, the Stan Lee thing, which they drag out for like 2 or 3 scenes, is like just one big whole Marvel thing, which I can get on board with, because just recently, I know for a genre that I love so much, I'm like really hating on it right now. But seriously, like just recently, I was thinking about the fact of the people that like cheer and get happy at the Stan Lee cameos. It's like, are they tired yet? Because just can you still muster the energy to get excited about the thing you're expecting in like every single movie of like 20 or 21 movies at this point? Yeah, so the fact that they had to go with that, I don't mind. But then there's stuff that's just so, like, stuff that just seems so easy. Like the fact when, he talks about the Guardians of the Galaxy. He's guessing who they are. And he first, guesses they're the Justice League, and then they get pissed off, and then he says, I know, you're the Guardians of the Galaxy. And one of them says, that's an entirely different universe. And, like, some people probably think that's, like, some big-ass joke in this movie because people are just so thrilled to hear the characters acknowledge the universes, just in general. But, I mean, once again, have we not been here already? It's like, okay, yeah, but it's like the Stan Lee thing. It's like, okay, you keep hearing, and the Stan Lee jokes and the Green Lantern jokes, it's like, you keep hearing the same ones. How do you muster the energy to think it's the greatest joke you've ever heard every damn time? I don't get this. We know. We've heard all of this before. And there's even there's smaller stuff that feels more, it still feels like it's lifting from, like, Batman, or Lego Batman, but it's subtle enough to be fine. Like, I felt like the fact that Nicolas Cage plays Superman was very akin to Billy D. Williams playing Two-Face in Lego Batman, because it's like it's the part that the actor was more or less promised and pretty much had, and then for one reason or another it didn't happen, and then this is finally them coming full circle, getting to play that part, even if it's just a voice, it's still cool. Like, I do get that, but once again, it's just another case of me watching this and saying, oh yeah, I remember when Lego Batman did that. Last year, yeah, the beginning of last year. So, yeah, but there is still stuff that did make me, like, laugh out loud. I laughed embarrassingly loud at the Alfred trailer, so there is that. And the coming soon puns were just kind of I guess they hit me in a weak spot or something, but that was kind of funny. But then, and they also, for a movie that seems so sort of targeted at children, with its, there's a lot of musical numbers in it, a lot of fucking noise, a lot of colors in your face. It was interesting to see some really dark jokes in there, like the whole changing time thing, like what they did to poor young Aquaman, and they, pushing the Waynes into the alley with the pearls and hearing the guns go off. With, young Bruce Wayne, like, hey Dad, thanks for taking us to a movie in this dangerous neighborhood. The stuff like that did work. When they stopped the turtles from going to the ooze. I found it interesting that when they went back in time to stop Superman from becoming a hero, it's Brando and that Krypton, and not Russell Crowe and Zack Snyder's version. I thought was an interesting choice, but still, it feels so easy to go for a lot of the jokes that they go for. Because you come up with this idea that they're going to time travel and try to stop the heroes from being heroes, and it's going to go, to their credit, hilariously awry. So, the problem here, though, is that they said, what do we do that's funny, and maybe a bit meta, if their characters are going to go back in time? So they say, let's literally make every Back to the Future reference we can. Very lazily. They start off with playing the familiar score from Back to the Future. Then one of them says, like, hey, we need to get, plutonium from Libyan terrorists or something. And it's like, yes, we get that it's Back to the Future, okay? And then, just when you think that's enough, he just flat out says, we're going to go back to the future. I mean back in time. And he says back to the future twice. He says it again later in the scene. And it's like, dudes, we know what joke you're making. We fucking know, okay? So there's a bit of that. That's very frustrating when you have it. It's like, if they had just done, all they did was like play the score part, it would have been okay. If they did the Libyan terrorist line, it would have been overkill, but it would have been like, okay, yes. But to go as far as to say the actual title twice, we're reaching the territory of those terrible spoof movies from back in the day, to where they didn't think the audience was going to get a reference, so they just literally said people's names or the names of movies. That's the shit that jokes like that, eventually, that's the territory they end up in. And that can be frustrating. So, but there's also, like on top of that, they do go into the area of, like, references to movies outside of superhero movies, like the Lion King dream sequence, where Robin's, like, desperately throughout the movie trying to get that attention. That's also kind of something that goes back to Lego Batman, where it's like, one of the things I praised Lego Batman for was it's like, I think this is the first Batman movie that's ever shown Robin respect. And so they took that nice little thing about Lego Batman, and they basically made a whole movie about it with this. And so, yeah, and then obviously when we see him, you know, imagining that he's, you know, being presented by Batman and everything's big and everything, they just said, let's do the opening of The Lion King. Let's totally recreate it. It kind of reminds me of the scene in Ted 2 when Ted completely reenacts the mess around scene from Planes, Trains, and Automobiles with John Candy, like, singing it and playing keyboard on the dashboard and all that. And it's like, he doesn't have a joke about it, and it doesn't really add to the scene. They're just doing that scene. And it's like, because you're a different character, doesn't really change much. You're still just doing the scene. What's the fucking punchline? So, that's, yeah. But, with that said, if you're still totally into the meta thing, like if Deadpool's 2 was still one of the funniest things you had ever seen, and, you know, Lego Batman is like, you wanted more of that, you didn't think Lego Batman did enough with it, then, yeah, I can see people totally going for this. It's another thing like Lego Batman where it's like, it's almost hard to concentrate sometimes because your eyes are so busy looking for all the inside references even in the background. But, yeah, but it just feels like, okay, if this came out by itself, like right now, and Lego Batman didn't exist, I'd probably have a much better opinion of this. But because Lego Batman does exist, this movie just feels like it's practically the same thing, really, and at least trying to accomplish the same thing. They couldn't even fucking do it without Will Arnett. It's so blatant, and it's, yeah, but it probably sounds like I hate it more than I do. Like, I don't even hate it. Like, that's not at all the word I would use. It's not even a movie that I, like, dislike. It's just, I don't think it offers anything new whatsoever, and the jokes just feel like such retreaded stuff that we've just had. Lego Batman was just the beginning of last year. Deadpool was just this past summer. Yeah, and like I said, even in Deadpool 2, I was just so tired of this. And it's like, yeah, but like, it's still obviously working for people in a pretty big way, so good for them, but sing another fucking tune. So, speaking of singing fucking tunes, I did kind of like the running joke also where they're like constantly trying to plug their themes on. So like, yeah, there is stuff in there absolutely that I find funny. Like I said, the fake trailers and everything as well, but more so, it just felt like way, like, 85% the overused stuff that we've already heard before in other movies. So, that's all I got out of that. So, sorry. And I don't think, I mean, if you just hear me hating on this, maybe you'll say something like, oh, well, it's just because you haven't seen the show. And it's like, no, it's not because I haven't seen the show, it's because I've seen the other fucking movies that were doing this. So, yeah. So, Let's go to our third movie, which is The Spy Who Dumped Me. So, first off, just get the very obvious thing out of the way. Yes, this, once again, much like Teen Titans Go to the Movies, felt like something we'd definitely seen before, better. Particularly Paul Feig's Spy with Melissa McCarthy, which I really, really like. And it's like, not only that, this movie, like, has the same twist and everything. And it's like, it's even more blatant by the fact that, it stars their, Melissa McCarthy and Paul Feig's previous collaborator, Kate McKinnon, being the wacky one to the straight Mila Kunis. And they... excuse me. And so they're basically the whole... A lot of the movie should have been... Like, the heart of this movie should have been the two of them. Because obviously with Kunis playing the straight role and McKinnon playing the more funny, out-of-control one, a pretty decent formula. Like, I go on and off with how I feel about Mila Kunis, but overall, in roles like this, I'm fine. And obviously I love Kate McKinnon, but she's been having some trouble in the movies. Like, while she was my favorite part of Ghostbusters, I do think that they still weren't making very good choices for her, and obviously Rough Night is one of the worst movies of the past 5 years. So there's a lot of visible problems here with how movies are sort of treating her, and this is probably the best she's been handled so far in a movie, but it still seems like so far away from what she's capable of still. And I think I said this about Ghostbusters, but probably Rough Night as well, but I do feel like a lot of her strength, especially like on Saturday Night Live, comes from the fact that I am pretty sure she writes a larger majority of her own stuff. At least I believe I've heard that. And if that's the case, you can tell. Like, if she's in control of what she's doing, it's definitely much more, comedy magic than what we're getting in these movies where she's being written and directed by somebody else. And when this starts off, you sort of know immediately that these two things are not going to go together very well. Because when it starts off, we see Justin Theroux doing the spy thing, as we expect. And it's like he's in a straight-to-DVD Wesley Snipes movie. So it's like, not quite, we won't insult him enough to say it's Steven Seagal levels. We'll say straight-to-video Wesley Snipes, which is maybe a tier above. So, and then what we have here is he does a whole action scene, once again, as we expect, and then it cuts to Mila Kunis playing an arcade game with a gun in this really shitty segue that does not mesh with what we just saw before, regardless of what they were trying to do. And just when you get used to the fact of, oh, that was a shitty transition, it turns out that that wasn't the end of the Justin Theroux scene. No. We're going to be cutting back and forth between this scene of Mila Kunis at a birthday party in a bar and Justin Theroux doing what would normally be the spy opening before anything else happened over here. I don't know where the editor thought this would have been a strength and what it would convey positively, but here we are. So, and this isn't the first time, or this isn't the last time this movie is going to make a bad decision like that. So, and just as we get used to this really sloppy opening, as it is, it still feels like it's sort of cutting to the chase. Because it does feel like it's sort of moving on fast. It's quickly. They're showing us one thing, then another, then they establish the breakup. But then they go back, and for some reason we have to see them, a flashback to them when they met for the first time in this bar. And then it's like, oh, okay, so we're going to do this thing, just when the movie seemed like it was moving along at a pretty good pace and cutting out all the bullshit. But then once again, no. This is something we're going to be repeatedly cutting back to through the entirety of the movie, is this one scene. We're not cutting back and getting flashbacks to their whole relationship that led up to this. Strictly that one night, the first night they met. And if you think this is going to pay off in a big way, you're kind of probably mistaken. So it's, yeah, so immediately it just feels like it's put together in a weird way that is not meshing the action and spy stuff with the Mila Kunis type of comedy going on here. So, and then it gets in a really big damn hurry because it's like they establish that she's like really torn up about this breakup that happened like today or last night even. And they show like the text messages where it's like he just says, "Hey, sorry, we're over," and like the whole wall of texts that she sent back to him that he didn't respond to. She's been out of shape and she's like so torn up about it. She's practically going crazy. She's basically doing a comedic, you know, Alex Forrest type thing. And then like the next day, she meets a dude in her store. And this dude is going to lure her into a van and tell her the whole spy stuff. But lucky for them, apparently they knew she was going to get over this immediately because they established this dude as like this, you know, sort of love interest type. And like she sort of like immediately sort of, that attraction is there where like you know the direction they're taking this. And it's like, how convenient for them they needed to lure her into a van because she just seemed to get over this borderline psychotic place she was in almost immediately to get them to this point. So, that's your hardworking screenplay at work. So, and then obviously, once she learns he's a spy and people start coming after them and people were getting shot and they, you know, slapstick around action scenes and all that, it's gonna basically turn into, remember Ashton Kutcher and Katherine Heigl, that movie Killers? That's basically what it turns into. It's that, and it's also very easily comparable to The Hitman's Bodyguard in regards to the type of action and just how violent that action gets. Because they try to balance the really heavy violence that's really not played for comedic effect with the really sort of lighthearted, you know, girls' friendship movie that's at the heart of it, or attempting to be at the heart of it, with jokes like the fact that Kate McKinnon's name is Morgan, and then at a not-so-crucial point, one of the big payoffs is that her name is Morgan Freeman. That's the whole joke. It's like just naming her that was a big joke they were leading up to, and that's the payoff. So, once again, as if we haven't heard this joke before, but they play it up as if like it's one of their most important cards here, so there is that. And of course, they have McKinnon doing, like, the silly voices and the over-the-top expressions and all that. She is very, very good with expression, sure. Like I said, this probably uses her better than Rough Night and Ghostbusters did, but still a far cry. And it is nice to see, like, every now and then they have those scenes about their friendship, more or less, the sort of downplayed scenes. Well, downplayed when you compare to the action scenes, at least. And there's some nice scenes in there where they, like, try to humanize them, particularly McKinnon's character that's played up for a while. It's just the over-the-top best friend character that's always getting her into trouble because she just handles things in the absolute worst, most obnoxious way possible. But then they actually get a scene when, like, we cut back again to that bar scene with Justin Theroux for some reason, to show that he, like, kind of insulted her at the bar a little bit. And the fact that McKinnon's character has, like, been carrying this with her, and it, like, really hurt her to hear that. When it was just a simple comment, like, you know, you're a little over the top, you're a little too much, is what he says. And that, like, really gets to her, and it's like, that's, like, a really humanizing thing for this character type that we've seen so many times before. And I really like that they played that angle to her character, so... But that stuff is few and far between. This is another movie where it's like... I mean, if it weren't for Judd Apatow, I'd probably specifically put it on comedies aimed mainly at a female demographic that just think that dicks, on principle, are the funniest things ever. Like, the presence of a dick is automatically a joke and automatically hilarious. That's great for our self-esteem, by the way. But, yeah, and everything from Girls Trip to, I've lost track of all the movies with dicks in them, but which is troubling. So there's So that's, yeah, so it's one of those movies as well, or tries to be one of those movies, despite everything else in it. Um, and then it eventually brings in another character, an assassin. Sort of like the Gwendolyn Christie character I was talking about in The Darkest Minds. It's like, I think this is what that character was supposed to be. And she's like this really hardcore assassin that's also like an Olympic gymnast or something, or she was at one point. And they play her up as like this really sort of hardcore character. But the problem is they eventually, she starts to work in her gymnastics into the torturing of them, and it's sort of like, I can't tell anymore if this is supposed to be funny or brutal, or both even, because I was talking about how like extreme the violence goes. As I said, it was reminding me of The Hitman's Bodyguard. But the thing is there's nothing funny about it, which I think is what this type of movie needs to do, considering that's sort of its main point. Nobody making The Spy Who Dumped Me went into it saying, we're going to make a really hardcore violent movie. You gotta do it, like, to use another Paul Feig movie as an example, The Heat. While The Heat is certainly not the greatest movie at all, there is one scene I remember where, I was surprised at the violence in The Heat, but the thing is Feig actually found a way to make it funny, because I remember the scene when Michael McDonald stabs Sandra Bullock in the leg, and then he leaves it there, and then they leave, and then they try to escape, and she takes the knife out and all that, and then they start to come back, and they have to look like nothing changed, so she has to put the knife back in herself. And it's like, that's how you do, like, funny graphic violence. And this movie doesn't know how to combine the two at all, much like The Hitman's Bodyguard. Those two movies' problems are very similar as well, so that's... And yeah, when this character comes into it especially, it's like they're searching for that ground, but they never find it. But, to the movie's credit, that kind of surprised me, as out of place as the violence feels, I was kind of surprised by how almost non-stop the action feels. Like, it does feel like if there's one big problem the movie has, it's way too long. It's like, it's almost 2 hours, and really feels it. Like, when it feels like we're reaching a sort of climax or close to an ending when it's barely been an hour, and we still have like 50 minutes left. But it does feel like it's constantly doing something. And like they really do go for it, at least. So they did do that. But still, it's like, there's just something that's not really meshing. They also do the old cutting a body part off of a dead body thing just for the sake of being gross out. I think even Baywatch did that last year. So another movie that thought dicks were hilarious. So there's, yeah. So that's, yeah. But even so, they do sort of keep it alive, and it's not like that. So yeah, these pieces that don't go together, I suppose, for the most part, well, not the most part, but they work individually enough to where the movie's not, like, unbearable. So, I mean, you are still kind of in a bad place if that's a compliment, it wasn't unbearable, but, yeah. So, it's, yeah, I actually am not quite sure what I expected from this. Because obviously I saw it because Kate McKinnon was in it. That's really the only reason. But it's like, I don't know. This really could have gone either way. It could have been on par with Spy, or it could have been this, or it could have been something monumentally worse. But yeah, that's where we are. So yeah. So let's go ahead and end real quick on Action Point. The next movie in Johnny Knoxville's career that he once again beat the holy fuck out of himself to do, to where it's based on, well, it's kind of like, it's like Adventureland by way of, the Jackass stuff, like the stunts and the humor and all that, the gross out stuff and all that, and of course by extension Bad Grandpa, because there's this story that's like, not necessarily a wraparound story, but it's like it's the story within the story where he's like a grandpa now, again, looking after a young, grandson or daughter, again. And he's relaying this story to her, and I'm not really sure what the point of this is. When you look at it, I suppose it's maybe to show how he grew as, like, a parent, and, like, a more caring, less neglectful one. But they don't really get that point across ever. It's just kind of in there. So there's that. There's no, like, kind of profound scene that, like, brings the two together. This is just what it is. This is how the story's told, I guess. So, alright. So obviously it was based... It really seemed like a passion project for Knoxville, based on an actual place called Action Park, which I think was in New Jersey. And there was, like, a documentary about it called, like, The Most Insane Amusement Park Ever, or something like that. And it had stuff like, you know, the really irresponsible underage staff, and the rides that were, like, fixed up with duct tape that people, like, got injured or killed on, that were just really poorly put together. And that was just kind of the thrill of it, was just how sort of unsafe and dirty and, you know, everything was. So, yeah, but the thing is like, I'm still... Okay. So, let's start with the fact that, one of the things that made Bad Grandpa work so well, I think, and obviously the Jackass movies, is that sort of Sacha Baron Cohen-like participation of other people. And the way that... But the thing about Bad Grandpa was the way he was able to incorporate that and actually make a story around it. Like, it's sort of shocking to me how well done Bad Grandpa is. And there was also, like, some actual heartfelt moments in it, too. And this movie tries to go straight for the story that just happens to have a few stunts in it. But the problem here is that the stunts don't really connect to anything. Like, in Bad Grandpa, there were these great bits just kind of throughout the movie, but the story itself was always kind of going in those bits. And here it's like, when Knoxville's going to get flung into a barn, or get hit by somebody being dragged by a motorbike, or hit with a fire hose, or anything like that. It's just all really, really gratuitous, and does not add up to, like, the payoff is not worth the effort and the pain that he gave and put into it. Because I think it said that he had, what was it, like 4 concussions. There was the thing where he, something in his eye that's supposed to be there, he, like, smashed his face, and suddenly that thing in his eye was, like, no longer there. He said it, like, practically vanished. And then he, like, went to blow his nose, or he went to sneeze, and his eye pops out of his socket. This is not the movie, by the way. This is Knoxville in real life, post this shoot. And then I think he said he, like, broke a hand and he lost 2 teeth. And I think there's more stuff in there. And it's like, you hear that, and you see why, and it's like, that really sucks. I mean, I know if you're, like, not a fan, it'll be real easy to say, you know, why would he do that anyway? Let alone for a shitty movie, and for, like, seemingly no purpose whatsoever, that does not serve the movie in any way. But no, as a fan of what he does, and seeing the passion in it behind, and just what he's willing to do, and how fascinating that is, yeah, my first thought is, it sucks that this does not serve the movie in any way whatsoever, and just feels like it's in there just to be in there. There's nothing that leads up to it. It's not the big payoff from a build-up. It's just stuff that happens that's not connected to anything. And that he got so fucked up to do that stuff, it just feels so meaningless in the long run when you look at the full product of this movie. Because you look at that, and it's like, the rest of the movie around him, like, he's putting so much into this, the rest of the movie around him is, like, so half-assed. Because you've got scenes like, obviously, of course, there's a competing park that's going to be, like, this really big deal near them. And could put them out of business. It's a good burger, basically. So, so yeah, there's going to be a scene where they go over there and they sabotage the place, or they attempt to sabotage the place. And you're like, oh man, what kind of shit are they going to get into? Little do you realize how literal that is. So they go over there, and he pisses on some towels. Chris Pontius takes a shit, and some dogs fuck. And that's the whole scene. And it's like, you think you're going to get this big whole thing of like, oh, just how big is this going to go? Like, what are they going to do in this place to cause all this trouble? That's it. 3 things happen. Very mundanely, and the scene is over. They run away. And it's just like, there really should have been... Like, every scene leaves you thinking, I really thought that was going to go somewhere. Or I really thought that was going to go, like, above and beyond or something. And there's just... Yeah. And I don't... Maybe it's the absence of, like, Jeff Tremaine, maybe. Because he directed the Jags movies. I'm pretty sure he also did Bad Grandpa. So it's like... Maybe it's the lack of a director that wants to go for it. But... Yeah, because, like, you look at the, you know, the credits, and it's like, you've got, like, Mike Judge was involved in the story and all that, but it's like, there's just something, the one side of it, from Knoxville's side, just seems so willing to do anything, and then there's the other side of this movie that is a much larger portion of the movie, that's just like, it barely wants to be here. So it's like, well, we know this story point, right, and we've got this story point, right? Well, I guess that's all we need. Like, this movie barely reaches an hour 20. Because it's like, hardly any thought went into it outside of what Knoxville was doing. So it's like, and it's one of those movies where it gets to that point to where it's like, you have the tired bits of like, when they decide they're going to put in a petting zoo. So what do? They go to the woods and they capture like raccoons and squirrels and stuff like that. It's like any movie you've seen where there's a joke about a squirrel or a raccoon, you got that scene, only it's like really cut down because this scene's like 30 seconds long. And then you've got like the age-old thing where somebody hides under the table while 2 people fuck because they were doing something in the room they shouldn't have been and they had to hide, and then this is what happens. That old thing happens. There's this whole thing where it's one of those things where they plant a seed. They plant a seed early, and we know exactly what conflict it's going to cause, because it's set in the time period where like the Clash was like up and coming, where it's like, here, listen to these up and coming guys, and she's like, what I want to do more than anything is to go to this concert that the Clash is putting on, and he's like, sure, yes, of course we'll do that. Immediately in this scene at the very beginning, we know where this is going, but they build it up. Like, they bring up this Clash concert like maybe 5 times throughout the duration of the day before we finally get to the inevitable moment we've all been waiting for, when he forgets about the Clash concert and says he has more important things to do. But obviously, it's even more forced because of the way she decides to approach this as well. It's not like, hey, remember the Clash concert? And he's like, oh, damn, well, sorry, I gotta do this. No, she walks up to him and says, are we ready to go? And he says, I got all this stuff to do. She doesn't say, dude, the Clash concert. She says, never mind, and walks away mad. And it's like, maybe there would have, I don't know, I don't know why I'm analyzing this scene in Action Point. It's like, it could have gone this way or this way or this way. It's not worth it. It doesn't matter. But that just goes to show, like, how lazy they were in regards to, I guess these are what the conflicts are. And then another age-old way to set up conflict, we set up very early that there's something she's not telling him about the whole, basically she's gonna live with her mom and her new boyfriend. And that's gonna be that. And so she just says, oh, there's something I haven't told him and I don't want to tell him. And then they build it up until it's time for conflict with like 15 minutes of the movie left. That's what a large portion of this movie is, with Knoxville, you know, fucking his shit up left and right like he used to do. And it's like, for what purpose? It's so disappointing. And like I said, you even get those emotional scenes. Like, there's a great emotional scene in Bad Grandpa, when it's like, what is it? He like leaves the kid and then he goes back for him or something. I haven't seen Bad Grandpa like since the theater, but I still remember really liking what they did with it. And yeah, Knoxville has shown actually for quite some time that he does have an acting ability. Like, that's like, it's not just, you know, the throwing him around, fucking himself up. Like, he can do more than that. He can actually act. That's what made those bad grandpa scenes work so well. And there is an emotional scene in this movie where he sits down with her and basically explains why he is the way that he is. It's a really good scene for him, and it really sets up his character in a really nice way. But it's like everything up to this point, it's like what he's doing in this movie is so wasted, just despite his commitment. And it's like I just feel like they really fucked him on this. It sucks. So that's the thing here, and what even adds insult to injury is the whole box office thing, where this is like, I mean, you think about all the movies that have gone into wide release, and this like made like, what was it, less than $1 million on its opening day or something, and it's like the 23rd worst opening wide release ever, and it was estimated to make $10 million on its opening weekend. It made $2 million. And it's like, you just knew there was kind of something here, and I think people kind of sensed it too. I mean, the marketing wasn't that prominent. He was out there doing it, but there just seemed to be a sort of, you know, lack of anything. It was one of those movies where after it came and went, people were like, wait, that exists? Wait, that was out? When? And it's, yeah, I feel like if they had put something more into the product and left more to talk about, surely that would have helped. I'm sure it still would have gone under the radar, marketed as it was, but there would have been something that kept it alive if they had really put as much effort into it as Knoxville did. But regardless of that, it's just going to kind of go off and be this thing he can chalk up as to, well, that sucks that happened, but yeah, so I'm hoping it doesn't, like, I mean, I know he's getting older in regards to doing the stuff that he does, but it's like, I'm hoping this doesn't discourage, like, his passion for what he does and his commitment to what he does, because that's definitely always to be admired. I know, like, the whole thing is, like, it's really dumbass shit that nobody should do, but it's just, yeah, there's just something about it that he makes it seem like it's this really, you just really admire his commitment to it. So, and his commitment to, like, when you watch the Jackass movies, and it's like when he's so committed to getting the best footage possible, no matter how fucked up he gets. And it's like, yeah. I always think back to the riot control stuff in the second Jackass movie, where he's trying to convince Dunn to go out there, and he's like, it's gonna hurt a lot, but it's footage, you know? It's it's like, don't worry about it. It's just really loud. So, yeah, but in the meantime, this is what we have, so that's a bummer, but yeah, so that's going to be it for this. We actually I'll be seeing BlacKkKlansman on Tuesday, which I am so happy about. I'll probably see the Happy Time Murders just because I think that's the next one, yeah. Just, I don't know, there'll be talking points, at least. I'd like to think I'll see Crazy Rich Asians soon, and then I'll see, like, I think they just released Bad Samaritan, I think is, like, on streaming now. Whatever comes up. So, that, and then I do know Versus isn't what I thought it was going to be, but it is something that I think we'll still have some fun with, so, yeah, so, until all that stuff, that's it.